Thanks, Joanne, for being with us. Well, why don't you first give us a quick update what's happening on the federal level with proposed EPA regulations?
Well, the Environmental Protection Agency, as you know, has filed a proposed regulation on new power plants that currently do not exist. So they have basically said that unless a new power plant that would use coal as its main fuel source, unless they actually use this new technology that doesn't exist right now, you're not going to be able to use coal for a power plant. That was just published in December. In June, we're going to see another regulation by the Environmental Protection Agency with regard to existing power plants, and we are very concerned that their goal is to eliminate any kind of coal-powered plant in the near future. Totally eliminate them.
We have a lot of coal in this region, so this is of a special interest to us. Can you tell us what this is going to mean for cooperative members?
Well, here's what I fear. Number one, that the biggest mistake that we could make as a country is to eliminate any source of fuel to power electricity. That's just, you always need to have choice. Number two, if you eliminate coal, for example, and most power plants in the United States are fueled by coal, then what does that leave us? That leaves us with changing over to a different fuel like natural gas. It would leave us with some biofuels, maybe solar and wind, but ultimately we know that if you get rid of the most readily apparent fuel, then our bills are going to go up. I don't know how much they're going to go up, but there is no doubt that if you have to switch over from being a coal-fired plant to a different kind of plant, I mean, you're talking millions of dollars.
Billions, yeah.
Billions probably, and who's going to foot the bill? Because we're cooperatives and our members own us, we don't have stockholders. Our members are technically our stockholders, and we don't want to impose huge new costs on them.
So what can cooperative members do?
Well, this is going to be a war waged on 2 or 3 fronts. Number one, it's being very vocal with your friends and your neighbors, and you know, if your children play on a sports team, the moms and the dads, talking to everybody about how this proposed rule by the Environmental Protection Agency is going to really make it difficult for our rural communities all across the country, and how our electric bills are going to go up, and it's hard to tell how much, number one. Number two, there is a way, if you go to tellepa.com, it's a website, or action.coop if you're a co-op member, to send a note to the EPA. And there's suggested language, or you can write your own, but it's action.coop or tellepa.com. That's one thing to do. Number two is to try to engage your legislators at the federal level, your federal representative in Congress, your 2 United States senators, and make them understand very simply, you know, what this is going to do to your family budget. And you're saving this much money for your children to go to school, and suddenly you can't save that anymore. So there are some really tough choices here. And then just, there's nothing better than neighbor talking to neighbor over the backyard fence, or, you know, out in the, at a ball game or something. But the more people know, I think the madder they're going to be, and the more they'll speak out. And we need as many voices speaking together on this as we possibly can have.
All right. Thank you very much, Joanne.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right, thanks Ted for being here. Why don't you explain to us what goes into the decision as to whether or not Sioux Valley uses an underground line or an overhead line?
There are multiple things that we look at, Carrie. The first of which probably is cost, and the cost to build a underground system is up to triple what the cost of an overhead system is, so it can be significant. We also take into account the right-of-way, the type of right-of-way. Is it an urban environment? The underground is accepted more readily in an urban environment. The overhead is more typically what we would try to do, what we're trying to do in a rural environment. We look at trees. Do we have tree problems where we're going to have to be trimming trees forever, and that's something we're not going to want to be dealing with on an overhead line. We look into the acquisition of the right-of-way itself. Is it a big, wide road ditch where we got plenty of room, or is it a narrow road where we don't have a lot of room, or can we get a private easement on the adjacent landowners, which is what we'd like to do on all of it. That helps us out also a lot.
Right now, approximately how much overhead and underground do we have on the Sioux Valley system?
We are just about 50-50. We have just a little bit more underground than we do overhead. We have about 3,000 miles of underground and about 2,900 miles of overhead line.
How does that compare to other systems?
We're a little higher on underground cable percentage than most typical systems in this region. Most of them haven't went after the large underground replacement like we have in Minnesota, for example, and they don't have the urban area where all they're putting in is underground, so they have a lot of older overhead lines that haven't been replaced since they were installed in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Now, when it comes to the operation of the system, are there any issues that arise if you have too much underground?
There are. It can cause some operational issues with just working on the system. The overhead system, you can obviously see what's wrong. You can fix what's wrong by seeing it. On the underground, you need specialized equipment and tools to work on it, to dig it up, to figure out what's going on. The people that are doing the work need to be more on their game. They need to be really aware of what's going on in an underground system so they don't make a mistake. The equipment that we need to be able to switch underground system to alternate feeds, them kind of thing, is very expensive, very highly technical that we need to use.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Ted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Betty, for being here. Every single year we get questions about capital credits. What are they? How are they used? Can you explain to us exactly what capital credits are?
Well, in an electric cooperative, instead of profits, we have margins, and then the margins get allocated or distributed to all the customers who purchased electricity from the cooperative that year.
Okay, so what's the difference between allocated capital credits and retired capital credits?
Okay, allocated capital credits are on the cooperative books as equity. So if you're allocated capital credits, that's your equity in the cooperative. And then the cooperative uses that to replace lines or the facilities. And then when the board decides that the financial stability of the cooperative is okay, it actually gets retired, and that's when it comes back to the customers as a bill credit.
So how does the board of directors decide how much every year to retire?
Well, they look at the financials every year, our lenders' covenants and what kind of margins we do have to have, and then based on that, that's how they determine how much can be returned back to the customers.
So what happens when the member dies or when they leave the cooperative?
Well, when they die or when they leave, we still have those capital credits on the cooperative's books as equity. And when the board decides to retire capital credits, a general retirement, they would get retired that way and returned to the customer or the estate of that customer. Or if a person would die and the heirs would like to have the capital credits early, they could apply for that and proof of the death, and then get the capital credits at a discounted amount.
Okay. So what cycle are we currently on when it comes to retiring capital credits?
Our oldest capital credits on the books are about 23 years old, so we have 1990 to retire yet.
And so what was the amount this year?
We retired $1.5 million.
And that went back to our members in the form of bill credits.
Yep, and then some part of that was the early retirement for estates.
All right. Anything else you want to share about capital credits?
I guess it's the heart and soul of the cooperative. I mean, that's the equity of the cooperative, and that's the ownership that the customer has in the cooperative. It is their cooperative.
All right. Thanks a lot, Betty.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Jake, for being here. Why don't we start out talking about some of the technical improvements that you made in 2013?
So for Sioux Valley Wireless in 2013, we installed a number of new wireless backhaul links. This allowed us to get more capacity out to customer connections and allow for faster, better performance going into 2014.
So any changes in plans for 2014?
So there will be no change in speed plans. We'll still have our 2 megabit plan and our 3 megabit plan on our traditional VIO service, and then we'll actually have 2 and 4 megabit plans on our WiMAX service still.
Now, from what I understand, you do have some plans to make some improvements operationally in 2014. Why don't you share with us what those are?
Right, so what we'll be doing in 2014 is actually continue to improve those networks and those connections. We'll allow for redundant connections to networks, so that will help minimize customer downtime and allow for a little better performance. And then as we get further into the year, it'll allow to evaluate any possible speed increases for those customers on the network.
So what are some of the biggest issues that you face as a wireless provider in terms of, I imagine, just like my family, we continue to use more and more bandwidth for all the devices in our household.
Right, that's one of the biggest problems we go up against day to day is the demand. We're seeing more and more people actually cancel their cable connections and allow for online streaming. So as we plan from month to month and year to year, we really like to keep enough capacity so that we see, as we see that increased demand, we have it available and customers don't have to suffer. So as the year goes, we're actually planning on a number of backhaul improvements, increases actually, so our fiber will increase throughout the year to help accommodate that demand from the customers.
Anything else you want to share with us?
No, just we're continuing to look at our operational improvements internally with additional hardware, as well as continuing to improve our human resource aspect of it and allowing those people to have better technical skills and help solve customer issues on that first call that comes in.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jake.
Thank you.